Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel. And this is our program, Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my co-host, John Raab. John?
How you doing, everybody? Thanks so much for joining us.
So today we have a very special guest that many of you will recognize. In fact, all of you should recognize Dee Snider. And he not only is, been a rock and roll icon, but guess what? He also writes books, and that's what we're interested in, is his creative side outside of uh, three-chord blues and rock. So, Dee, welcome.
Great to be here. I'd like to say to the viewers, explain the background. It's not very metal, I know. It's called the Pink Room, or whatever color it is. And we live in the tropics, and it's the only room I get really good internet in. So that's what you get. The dungeon, I've got no signal in the dungeon. So I'm here in the guest room.
We're good.
So you're in Belize, right?
Yeah, we've been down here. We got a house down here for many years now, and very blessed to be able to go run and hide when when the weather gets not too friendly up north. So we're down here hiding.
So let me ask you, how obviously people know your other career and all that, but how did you get into writing? What made you want to write a book, especially a fictional book? But what got you into that world?
Well, first, like to say that as an offshoot, I was thinking today that I think I'm one of the most underestimated people probably in the world. Beyond rock and roll. I mean, since I've been a kid, I've just been sold short by everybody, by my parents. Parents like, you can do anything. My parents like, you might want to think about civil service. It's got good benefits. It was all, I took a test in school, an aptitude test. Farmer. I think I said I liked plants or something. And I mean, so my entire life, it's been very little has been expected out of me. Yet I myself have had a vision for myself that, I would continue to grow and change and challenge myself and do new things. I knew I wanted to be a DJ, an air personality, before my band took off. And I said, well, then I'm going to go into radio. I've been doing radio for 30 years, very successfully. I've done mornings, I've done nights, I've done satellite. I have a syndicated show, 27 years. I've been doing syndicated radio. So, and then writing, I always knew I wanted to write, but I got to say that to go back, the bug really hit me after I created the Twisted Sister videos. They were just, I said, well, what do you, Marty Callner, my dear friend, director Marty Callner, well, what do you see for this? Like, well, father's yelling at the kid, and the kid turns it to me and blows the father out the window, and people start just jotting notes. And next thing I know, there's all these like cards up on a board, and people are running around scrambling, bringing this young kid's, crazy idea to life. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's like the most talked about video at the time, and historically considered one of the great rock videos of all time. So I started, down like this. That led me into writing. And I went from writing the videos to writing screenplays. And I've sold, and TV shows, and I've sold things, and I've sold, we'll talk about Strangeland a little later. I've had things produced, and I continue to write. I have things right now that we're hoping to move toward production on. And then, I went further. I wrote a musical called The Rock and Roll Christmas Tale, which was staged in Chicago and Toronto, and got great reviews. Now we're looking at possibly turning it into a movie. And that again, and this is a challenge thing. Like, okay, you can write a video. Can you write a screenplay? Okay, can you write a musical? And slowly but surely, I was, presented with, well, can you write a novel? And the step before that was writing my own memoirs. Right. And credit to, by the way, you just have to press play and I go. The credit
we like it.
Mick Foley,
Yes. Wrestler.
brilliant, the Hall of Fame wrestler, but a brilliant mind. And he's written many books, and he and I are good friends. And, he had read my writing, my short story writing and things like that. And when it came to doing my memoirs, he said, you should write them yourself. Nobody's going to voice it. I said, you think they'll let me? He goes, no, they won't. Their instincts are, well, I mean, in fairness to the
Sure.
book company, just because you can play football doesn't mean you can act. And just
Right.
because you can sing in a band doesn't mean you can do radio, which was proven by David Lee Roth many years ago when he tried to do it for Howard Stern. That was great.
That was
These are all different crafts. So you got to show them that you are a master of this craft. And so he said, right, just say, can I write a few chapters and you be the judge? And I wrote a few chapters, and the publishers were like, damn, you got this. And I wrote my own memoirs. So it was a logical, each of these previous steps, whether it was video, screenplay, stage play, was leading me to, all right, what about fictional novel,
Mhm.
fictionalized story? And it was COVID, and I was down here in Belize hiding, and I said, I'm not the person who's going to sit there endlessly watching TV. And I needed to challenge myself to something, and I had this idea. Originally it was going to be a screenplay, but then my son, to his credit, said, why don't you make it a novel?
Mhm.
And because he knew the story. And so I said, okay, that's it, I'm doing it. So I've always just always pushing myself, challenging myself, trying to do more, trying to achieve more. And I think ultimately, I'm trying to prove to my mother and father that I'm not a civil service worker, and that and the
You're
idea
not
of
a farmer.
writing me off. Yeah, I'm not a farmer. The idea of writing me off like, oh yeah, you're stay in your lane, D, is a big mistake. So I think I'm always, everything I do, just trying to prove to my mother and father that I have value.
well, the things that you kind of written before the novel had had like a visual effect to it. You're on stage singing, or you have a musical. But then when you write a novel, you have to create that vision for the reader to see what you want to see. How much of a challenge when you were doing that with Frats was it for you to create that vision that now I have to see through Dee's eyes because I don't have a stage?
Yeah.
Don't have a screen that I'm seeing his vision through.
Well, I've always been considered a good storyteller, and whether it's on the radio. I mean, I did talk radio for years, and so I always had that ability. And one of my is talking authors, credit where credit is due. Gene Shepard, his name is. He was a renowned radio personality in the start of the 50s, 60s, 70s, went into the 80s. He was nationally syndicated. I would listen to him every night. An incredible storyteller. And he also wrote short stories, and put in compilation books. And most famously, his book called God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash was he turned it into A Christmas Story. The movie. That's Gene Shepard narrating. He had was a great VO guy, great radio voice. He's the narrator. He's Ralphie. He's telling the story of his youth, the Red Ryder BB gun and all. He would tell those stories on the radio, and I would read his books, and his writing was as visual as his storytelling ability. So it empowered me as a storyteller. One of the greatest compliments I remember was on the air in Philadelphia for a year doing nights, and I was telling the story, and some guy, emailed in and said, I used to listen to Gene Shepard, and you remind me of Gene. What a compliment! That the guy that I admired, never met, was literally my hero and my inspiration in writing and radio. And that to be compared to him, that I had ripped him off that well. And he was that somebody who knew his stuff said, man, you sound like Gene Shepard. So so again, it went from verbalized to putting it on the page. It wasn't that hard. I really just I just heard myself telling the story in my head, and just laid it out there as I heard it being spoken.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, your history, obviously, in songwriting and all that, fiction, probably more than any other type of writing. You've talked about memoirs and stuff, has a rhythm to it. It has beats. It has a thing.
Mhm.
Did your music writing, did you think that that bled over and helped you write a novel that had the right beats and the right tone and the right rhythm to it? Do you think that translated?
You know what? I couldn't give you that answer. I could see
Yeah.
what you're saying. I could see yeah, I could see where you're connecting the dots there, and that's quite possible. I would say that my love of reading and writing, reading and the written word, and my I would sit as a kid, uh, always had a dictionary. I mean, now you can just press on the word
Right.
and come up on your iPad. Um, Click on the word, but I would always have a dictionary and I'd be looking at words. I'm so taken with grammar, not probably just proper grammar, but also just finding these great words that capture, that have a rhythm to it. Words have rhythms to it. And my lyric writing, I mean, not too many people use trite, jaded, boring, confiscated. I mean, four-syllable words in a teen rebellious anthem. What's
Exactly.
confiscated mean? So I had so many dictionary words in
Right.
my just lyrical writing. And, I said, well, if you want to know what it means, look it up, just like I did.
Right.
And so that was my first opportunities to really use my vocabulary. And I've often gotten props from people for having such a broader, I won't say a huge vocabulary, but a broader vocabulary than the average rock star. Though I will say the bar is set pretty low. I mean, people will go, wow, you're really smart. I go, yeah, compared to the others, yeah, but like not compared to Mensa, no, I'm not all that. But compared to the others, I appear Mensa grade, So I just benefit from this just incredibly low bar my peers have set for the most part. Man, you're such a nice guy. I'm not really that nice. They're just terrible. They're terrible people. I'm just a reasonable person, So I'm like, oh, he's a nice guy compared to them. Um, so really, like I said, that songwriting was the first place I was already like broadening my vocabulary before I started writing songs. So it was really my first chance to use these fancy words. I'm
Right.
not saying all my lyrics are fancy, but and to stick some in there when I could, and to go beyond just the normal,
Mhm.
yeah, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. No
Yeah.
offense, Beatles.
Yeah. They did okay. Uh,
Yeah, they broaden their vocabulary.
yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
songs are stories too. I mean, so there is that. A song tells a story, and so, or at least a good song tells a story, and so I would see how that could translate. You use your words, you use your thoughts, you use your creativity, and you spin a yarn.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Although lyrically, I tend to come from the school of be vague enough that people can put their story into your
Right.
lyrics.
Exactly.
Don't tell people what they should be imagining. Leave it broad enough. Now, not always. There are times where you get into something specific. Even the Strangeland inspiration, Captain Howdy and Street Justice, were very literal stories I was telling about this schizophrenic, sadist who was luring children into his world. And so I was telling a specific story there. Smoke on the Water. I mean, it's very, very clear.
Yeah.
They burned down the gambling house. It's in Montreux.
Yeah.
Funky Claude, who, by the way, I got to meet Funky Claude. I was at like a industry party in my magic office. I said, Dee, I'd like you to meet Funky Claude. And I look at this, it's like the little old, because now everybody's old. This little old like dude. I said, was running in and out, pulling kids on the ground. He goes, yeah, yeah, that's me. Yeah, yeah, he's twist drunk. Yeah, that's me. But wow, I just thought that was like a Funky Claude. I thought that was like a catchphrase. It's actually a person, Funky Claude.
I love it. I
But,
love it.
and now speaking of Strangeland, people might
Yeah.
not understand. I mean, it's 26 years old, but you not only wrote it, but you starred in it.
Yeah.
So, so you were the star of the movie, you were the writer of the movie, and what do you know? I mean, it's it's still relevant today, luring kids off a chat room to do I mean, so kind of talk about, telling the story from the actor point of view, because you had to write it, and then you're like, oh shit, can I act it the way that I wrote it?
Yeah, very strange because speaking about eloquence and vocabulary, Captain Howdy's his language
Mm-hmm.
was incredibly deep and philosophical, and and meanwhile, while he's torturing people, yet he's
Right.
being he's expounding on all these theories and beliefs, and it almost sounds like, if he wasn't torturing someone and sewing their mouth shut, you would say, oh wow, this guy's really makes a lot of sense. Wait a second, he's wait a second, he's
Yeah.
sewing the woman's vagina shut. So yeah, that character, that script, was, I remember I gave it to, because I had already written a few others, and had a close call. Oddly, one of my earliest scripts were like comedies. The first thing I sold was a children's movie
Oh,
called Junk Squad. And the first thing I sold, and so I was pretty happy. And then I bring my next script to my agent, Strangeland.
yeah.
And I remember coming in and okay, I'll be the agent and you guys are me. And she's like, yeah, I read the script and it was very good. It was very, very good. I think we can do something with it. I said, Tracy, why aren't you looking at me? You're that guy. I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. But I remember my wife. Oh my God, she's one of my first line people. So she'll be the first one to hear things, read things, and she's honest to the point of it's painful. So I finished Strange, and I said, and I gave it to her to read, and she went upstairs in the house. I remember, came down a couple hours later. She walks down and she's holding the script like it's a dirty diaper at her side. She's got it hold it and she's holding this, and she goes, "You want to tell me something?" And I said, "No, why?" She goes, "What the fuck was that? What the fuck is this?" And I'm like, "Who?" She's freaking the fuck out. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're
She's
fine.
freaking out.
All
Just, who am I married to? And I'm like, thankfully, I had the right words in response. I said, those are my nightmares, not my dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Perfect
she
answer.
said, but it was true. I
Yeah.
tried to think of what scared me.
Right.
Being chased by some slow moving zombie-like creature, didn't never really scared me. The idea of waking up helpless, naked, and then someone torturing you. And it was, by the way, folks, the first film rated R for scenes of torture. You're welcome. Started the genre. Eli Roth and James Wan bowed down before me. They have, when they were on my horror radio show that was called Fangoria Radio on for 3 years. I did that on Sirius XM. And but yes, but that the thing, the subject matter was like, what terrifies me? How would I hate to die? What to me would be my worst nightmare? So I put that into that story, and I said, if I'm scared, other people are going to be freaked the F out. I'll try and cut back.
I was. Yeah.
I'm getting a little passionate right now.
Yeah, that's good.
But yeah, so yeah, I just I don't know how we got off on that tangent there, but and that was the thing though. My agent said, I think we can sell this and make some money. And I was like, well, I'm attached. And she said, of course you are. You're the writer. I said, no, 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 no. I want to play Captain Howdy.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, but you've never done any acting before. And I said, well, I was in a college play. 1 year I was in school, in high school. I did Death of a Salesman. I was a bartender. Anyway, but I said, well, that's just, I don't care if it's not, doesn't go to a big studio. I don't care about that. I care about actually, being in this movie and seeing it brought to life the way I see it. Yeah. So, and just for the record, in that story, I am the father. I am the cop. That's where I wrote the story from. Like, what if my child was violated? But I don't have the face to be the handsome hero. But yeah, I sure as hell can play the sick fuck. So I was, I didn't even bother saying I'd really like to be the police officer because I know
Right.
that was going to go nowhere. And by the way, nobody other than my acting ability, as far as the looking, nobody had a problem with like, oh yeah, no, you're perfect, but can you actually can you act?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I had to show that I could.
Yeah. But again, that was storytelling through your acting. I mean, because I remember having to watch it a couple times and you kind of get the premise. Like the first time you watch it, I was kind of like, what the hell's going on? And then I watch again and then you start understanding a little bit more. It was one of those movies that I had to watch a couple times.
Well, I mean, and I hope other people gave it the same chance you
It
gave
should
it.
have.
Because it was, I mean, I wasn't trying to, I was not writing a standard horror film. It
No.
wasn't in any ways. It was psychological. My inspiration was Silence of the Lambs and Seven,
Yep.
for that
Yeah.
movie. More than, and even the way it was shot, I didn't direct it, been a horrible director, but I was very much, I was co-producer. And so the scoring, I wanted it to be John Williamson. I wanted to have those something that you wouldn't see in I didn't want to be Freddy Krueger. I
Right.
love you, Robert, and I love Freddy, but I didn't want the character to be funny. I didn't want people laughing. That was
Mhm.
interesting. In some of the early screenings, and even subsequently, I didn't want to give people an out. I didn't want to give people like a laughing moment where they could just sort of, I didn't want to give people any relief. I wanted to be unrelenting. I wanted the pressure to be on. What happened though in the movies is people were laughing completely out of place. You see, like, is it, long as the ornament, short as the pain. And you go, what was that? What was funny about that? And we realize is that if you don't give
Mhm.
people a place to release
Right.
this tension they've built up in
Right.
themselves, they're going to release it in odd places that
Yeah.
you wouldn't expect them to laugh. And they were laughing at the weirdest, and it was disjointed. It was just uncomfortableness, but I wanted them to be uncomfortable. I didn't want them to laugh at all, though. I wanted them to suffer right along with the victims.
It worked.
You're welcome.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your novel Frats. What brought that about, and what's the story there? What's the message there? What's this about?
Well,
There it is. Frats.
that's frats based on based on true events. It is. It's funny because when I presented it to the publishers, they were like, "This is great. It's about toxic masculinity," and I said, "It is." I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, whatever. If that's the catchphrase that's going to get you to publish it, go crazy." So there's everybody says toxic masculinity. Yeah, I see it when they point it out, but it wasn't the impetus for the
Right.
book. I grew up in a town on Long Island where I did not know that there was a unique uh, gang system, high school fraternities. The gangs were called fraternities, and they had charters with the police, just like a college fraternity would, and they had Greek names. And because they were fraternities, the school and the parents and everybody was kind of cool with them because they're fraternities. Oh, sure, there's hijinks, but they're fraternities. They're legitimized somehow. But this was just high school kids. They were gangs, but they walked through the hallways with impunity. And the people like me grew up in that town. First of all, this was my world. I didn't know any different. So from as a little kid, it was like, okay, don't go down that block. And if you go down there, you're gonna get your ass kicked, and stay away from those guys and avoid these people, and this was the minefield of your town. And I think every town's got its own
Town was
mind.
the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, some worse, some better, but there, this is the world we live in, and being a big weird dude, I was just trying not to get my ass kicked. Yeah, I didn't, I was just an oddball, didn't have a lot of friends, whatever. So just shuck and jive, man, shuck and jive, and so, but I thought this was normal. All the surrounding towns in the South Shore of Nassau County, Long Island, had fraternities, and that was it. Then I started to travel, tour the world, and from time to time, conversations about growing up in high school would come up. And when I brought up, the high school fraternities to all over the world, people go, "What's that?"
Yeah.
Like college fraternity. I said, no, high school. You didn't have those? Nobody had those. It was
Mhm.
it was a microcosm, a handful, about 5 towns, South Shore, very, very specific area. Somehow it grew, and nobody had experienced living in that world. So now I said I grew up in the minefield, so I knew the lay of the land. And I started to get this idea, like, what if you just transferred in
Mm,
from out of town, from another place, now that I know they don't have that there at other places, and you came into a new town, and without knowing the minefield, you walked into school day one and stepped on a mine.
yeah.
And this guy, Bobby, comes into town, does not know what's going on. And he's kind of a jock guy. He's kind of a guy who might have been in a fraternity in another time, but he's a senior and, he's new in town like anybody new. He's trying to make it through this last year of school and move on with your life. And in helping this kid that he made friends with out, not knowing that he was crossing the absolute wrong people to cross, he becomes public enemy number one to one of the worst, because some frats were more jock-like ones, others were more gang biker-like, but they all had fraternity names on their jackets. And he becomes public enemy number one, is forced to join a fraternity to protect himself from actions of the other fraternity. And along with those fraternity lifestyle comes a lot of partying, alcohol, drugs, the whole thing, and his whole life just wildly spirals out of control. And beyond the like, what if somebody came in who didn't know the lay of the land, it was the bigger idea of like how one thing can change your life forever. One moment in time, for better or for worse, one decision could just just change the course of your existence and just send you off in a totally different direction.
That's
And this guy comes in as a senior and his life is pretty set, and all of a sudden now, again, and all he did was try. He saw this dorky kid when he first moved into the neighborhood. August, he arrived. The town. The first kid he meets, a neighbor kid. He's just this geek. They hit it off. They both like comics and heavy metal, and so this unlikely pairing of this little dorky guy and this kind of cool guy, but he grew up in Ohio and he happened to get turned on to comic books at a young age, and so they connect. And he sees him being picked on, and he goes and he steps in, and helps his friend out, and that is just. And the rest of the book, it's very dark. It goes very, very dark. I'll just tell people reading it, there's a glimmer of hope at the end. There is hope. And it ends with a glimmer of hope, but it's a harrowing story.
It's
Sure.
very emotional. I'll tell you that. When I read it, it was very emotional. And it almost made me think when the guy, when you're talking, kind of walking in, it reminds me of kind of Shawshank, where it's like fresh fish, like walking into that area. Yeah. Cause it's a fish out of water. You're an alien in a world you don't know.
That's a really good analogy, because and thank you for reading. I appreciate it.
Oh, great.
And he walking in that first day into a brand new school, and just it's if you've ever changed schools, and I did it a couple times when I was younger, not in high school. I can't only imagine what it's like to walk into a high school, but it's still sort of like your head's kind of spinning
Yeah.
because you're looking at everybody, but they're all looking at you. The running joke in the gag in the not gag in the book though is that he's just referred to as new guy because the new kid,
New kid,
and that's it is. You're the new kid until a newer kid shows up.
That's right.
And I mean, they say that Ron Wood is still the new guy in the Rolling Stones. He's been in the band 40 years, and they still kid him about being the new guy.
Exactly.
Not even Alex would say the same thing about Neil and Rush. They were like, yeah, the new guy here.
Yeah, new guy. It's a new guy. So
Right.
he's a new kid, and that's like a really awkward thing to be, and just and they call it the commons areas where everybody in the morning was the entrance way to the high school, and everybody sort of gathered there. And he walks in, and his friend Brett is sort of trying to give him a quick cliff notes on the school as fast as he can as they walk, into the school, and it's like a shot out of a cannon. School starts at, whatever, 8:35, 9 o'clock. You get there at 10 of, you got to get your locker, you got to get to your class, you don't know your way around the school. And Brett's like barking out like, oh, that's them, and watch out for those, and this guy, and Bobby's just like, okay, just taking it all in. And then, of course, again, you're just trying to help Brett out. He winds up crossing the wrong people.
And the journey begins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? What are you working on now?
So, and I'm always, I'm just, again, I'm always trying to prove to my parents that I'm more than a farmer or a civil service worker. And I believe I've proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt to them. It's funny because, all the things I did, one of the things that impressed them more than anything was when I was on Broadway in Rock of Ages.
Wow.
They didn't get rock and roll. It wasn't their generation. So they saw it, they acknowledged it, they saw the fame, the fortune, but it didn't speak to them. But they always loved going to theater shows. And when I got asked to join Rock of Ages and they got to come, I saw their pictures standing in front of the theater, and it says starring Dee Snider. And you could see, I said, oh my God, I think they're proud of me.
Yeah.
So this is what pride looks like. Parents are proud. But this was something they could understand. They'd been going to musicals their whole life, to theater their whole life, and now their son was in the Helen Hayes Theater on stage, on Broadway. So that was a big thing to them. So, but I'm always looking for the new challenge. I love writing, though. I love writing. I've got a new screenplay that I'm starting to pick at based on a true story. It's set in the world. Let's tell you, it's kind of Ford versus Ferrari meets The Fastest Indian. If you know those movies, based on the race for the land speed record in the 60s when they first started using jet engines.
Yeah, Campbell and Breedlove and those guys. Yes,
Greg Breedlove and Art Arfons, particularly
Art Arfons, yeah.
their battle, which went on for a couple of short years and was just insane because they were just buying Air Force surplus jet engines and putting them on. Arfons got a station wagon chassis, and he put a fucking jet engine on it.
Yeah, exactly.
He was a farmer.
What could possibly go wrong?
He literally, the first test of the engine, they chained it to a tree in the backyard and they started it. And of course, it like burned down the fields. I mean, you can't do that anymore. There's laws against shit like this. And these guys were just, and there's one great moment where Breedlove and Arfons, they're going back and forth over the course of weeks and months, and they meet. And Art Arfons says, so we're just going to keep going till one of us dies?
Mm-hmm.
And Greg Breedlove goes, I guess so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm getting chills because, to be that, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, committed.
Passionate. I mean, just
and
that
passionate about what you do, willing to, literally ride the lightning, and just knowing that anytime you get in one of these vehicles, you may not be coming back.
Right.
At the end of the run. So, at the time, there are other people who did not. So it was a very interesting time, and I'm working on a screenplay for them. I'm also, I wrote a screenplay called My Enemy's Enemy, which I'm going to direct. And that's a next level in terror, based on I like actual events. I like historically accurate things. Like, even though FRATS is fictionalized, it's in a real world. So the characters have changed, and a lot of the people, they say, well, isn't that you? And isn't that, yeah. I said, well, they're amalgams. I mean, when it came to, there's a love story in FRATS, and the only love story as I know is mine. So to give it authenticity, I insert your relationship here with my wife, Suzette, and me, 47 years. And, our family threatening me to kill me on the first date and all that stuff. And I made that part of Bobby's story because it lent authenticity. And I'm pretty much a one woman dude my entire life. I mean, before I met her, I was like 21 when I met her. So it was in high school relationships. But anyway, but My Enemy's Enemy is based on an actual diner invasion that happened in 1982. 5 guys, 1 o'clock in the morning, came into a diner on Long Island, locked the door, ripped the phone off the wall, and armed to the teeth, and they had their way with 100 people for an hour. When I say had their way, you cannot imagine.
Oh, wow.
Imagine anything they did except kill them. They shot them, beat them, raped them, robbed them. I mean, and beyond. But they didn't. No one died, so they couldn't put them to death. They got 365 years consecutive each.
Wow.
It's considered one of the most heinous crimes in the history of Long
A lot of
Island.
souls died that day.
What is that?
They killed a lot of souls. They might not have killed bodies, but a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
souls.
yeah. Oh, the aftermath of the emotional
Oh,
damage to these people that was caused by these 5 guys. But I took that and I said, but what if?
Yeah.
What if there was a Jason Voorhees in there? Like not wearing a mask,
right.
but
Just
someone
that type
from
of
that mindset, that, and
that non-emotional, ruthless character. I mean, that's what he is.
yeah, trust me that the character is unique and different and unexpected, but it changes it goes from being the real story, and all of a sudden when this guy starts killing everybody methodically, one at a time, is why it's called My Enemy's Enemy, because I said, could anything make the victims join forces with these criminals, and a greater evil
There.
Right.
could do that?
Yeah.
So when they realize, oh, we're all going to die unless we team up.
You're right.
So My Enemy's Enemy it takes a very, very strange path, and
Yeah.
I've been supposed to start directing it. It's been
Yeah.
last summer we were in Vegas. We did all casting. We did all of our set up. God, we had a location scouted. Everything was set to go, and then it didn't get it wasn't green lit. I'm supposed to get a call during this interview. Yeah, it's about 40. I said, you know what? I'm going to book this interview. This producer never calls on time anyway. So maybe you can wait for me for a change. But anyway, so that's my next thing, is to direct a movie. And I'm going to get a lot more into producing into movies as well. Putting together a new production company. We're setting up a camp in North Carolina where there's a lot of really great things happening.
Yep.
Incentive-wise, but a lot of great movies. Academy Award-winning films have been made, from Forrest Gump to Last of the Mohicans to Dirty Dancing. It goes on and on and on. The amount of great movies that have been made there. So we're setting up a production company up there.
Nice.
Can't wait to see what comes out of it. Well, Dee, we got to wrap this up. I'm going to tell you, it's been nothing but a great pleasure.
We could go
It's
for
just
another
been
2 hours
wonderful.
if you wanted to, but your producer's going to call and screw the
Yeah.
whole anyway. So.
But we would love to do this again, have you back down the road, and because there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a couple more minutes and just quickly talk about He's Not Going to Take It, the graphic novel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just to do my due diligence.
Sure.
Cover all bases, because that's what I missed. Yeah, a while. This is just my moment in Washington, testifying in 1985, the Senate
Right.
hearing on music censorship, have become legend. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that.
No, I'll remember it well.
And it's crazy now to see the interest and given the time and the way the pendulum is swung and the way and censorship is taken, the tone of censorship has changed from a puritanical right wing to a ultra sensitized left wing. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. That's censorship too. It's so, and I get interviewed so many times. I mean, they talk about any course on censorship studies those hearings. There's been a lot of documentary stuff done. There's talk in Hollywood. I've been approached by a couple of places about doing some sort of a biopic on that story because it's pretty historic. and Z2 Comics wanted to do like a graphic novel, really get into it. And they really, I was really impressed because they wanted to know, they didn't just want to tell the story of that day. They want to know, how did I become that person at that moment in time? And they go back to the cradle. There's actually a frame of me in the cradle looking at my parents and my family. But how did I become the guy to walk in that room
Right.
and stand up and speak? I hope I spoke
Eloquently.
eloquently, and I
Yeah.
hope I represented us properly. I did the best I could, people.
Well, as a 15-year-old kid who heard that, I want to tell you that it's taken 38 years for me to say thank you, because from that point forward to kind of not really understanding and then realizing what you were doing was standing up for the creativity and not making the world gray, because how freaking boring is a gray world? You want colors to come into the world, and the creativity, whether you like it or not, the creativity for someone to have it should be allowed for them to make it. And that's what I loved about what you were trying to say, because it wasn't fuck the PMRC and what they were doing. It was stand up for the creativity and stand up for the authors and the people who create the content that you like to keep it going.
Art for art's sake.
You are.
Thank you for that. And not a day goes by that somebody doesn't do what you just did. And it's pretty amazing. They walk up and shake my hand and say thank you. And so that's, at the time, I felt pretty much left hung out to dry at the time, because nobody else was. I mean, Frank was there, John Denver was there, but they weren't on targets. They were not on the list.
No,
I was, and I didn't feel. I remember Ronnie Dio went after me in the press, and I'm like, what? I mean, who was he to speak for us? The first thing I said was, I cannot speak for anybody but myself. It's the first line. He didn't even listen to the first thing I said, yet he was publicly attacking me, a guy I knew.
own genre.
Yeah, I mean, I was so disappointed, and it hurt to have, but over time, I would do it again in a heartbeat, and it was been proven out. But beyond that, it was idea. Who the hell is calling us?
There he is.
Ignore that phone call. It'll disappear in a second. Is that who I think? No, it's not him. Let it stop. Oh, come on, people.
You're good.
The longest ring in the world.
That's yeah, but
yeah, they stopped.
Yeah.
But the idea that who was going to judge?
Right.
Who's going to, we talked about earlier on about lyrical content being, a lot of it being open for interpretation.
Right.
Sometimes it's right, it's right in front of you, a story, as you said, but a lot of times it's sort of generalized. And, and so who's going to decide what was the intent in the mindset of the writer?
Yeah.
And, and what's and say, well, what's offensive? What isn't offensive? Because you're offended. Maybe they're not, but other people might not be offended. So it was such a big deal. And Z2 did an amazing job. It was great to see myself as a comic book geek, as a kid, to see myself brought to life in a comic book, and pretty heroically. That was really cool. And, and boy, Hollywood really likes comic books, because it's really easy. They don't have to storyboard anything. It's right there. So who knows, maybe that story, of me going to Washington will see the light of day yet. But anyway you slice it, it's a great, for people who like graphic novels, it's really presented well. And there's a lot more to the story. It's interesting. It was interesting for me. One of the big realizations I had was, and again, I draw on these things in FRATS. Remember, I said I went to a new school when I was younger.
Yep.
And so I went to the new school in 5th grade. And I was a pretty cool, pretty tough kid in the school I came from. And I walked in the first day of school, and I got into a fight with unbeknownst to me, the toughest guy in school, Hammy, his name was. And I crossed him 3 o'clock outside by the flagpole. Come on, Hammy. He literally picked me up and threw me through the air into a wall, changing the course of my existence forever. But I realized if I had beat Hammy, I would have been the popular guy, and I never would have sat in my room imagining all the things that I imagined.
Right.
Playing guitar, singing, reading comics, reading books, all the things I did because I was not popular. Popularity is the death of creativity. I would have been getting laid.
Yeah.
I would have been one of the cool guys. I would have been in a frat. I would have been out partying. I wouldn't have had time to learn to become an artist. So I would reading this story, I go, damn, that was if that had not happened, you know, if I beat Hammy up, my whole life would be a different trajectory. And I'm grateful
Amazing.
to be thrown into the brick wall.
Amazing insight. I like
Yeah.
that.
So
Yeah.
anyway, so that's he's not going to take it. You can check that out, everybody too.
Well, we appreciate it.
Well,
All right, we covered
Yeah.
everything now.
it's
Yeah.
been great. I love it. DSniderBooks.com, everybody. Make sure you go to
Yep.
DSniderBooks.com and find out more about FRATS.
And everybody, if you go to the show, hit that little thumbs up that you like it, subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can have more wonderful guests like this. And Dee, we will get you back and have
Yeah,
some
man,
fun.
this is
This has
incredible.
been fantastic.
You need to teach a
Right.
class, my friend, because you
Yeah.
have so much insight.
All right, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you. Be safe down
Bye-bye.
there.